Afternoon, Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm not sure if you're also experiencing a rainy day, but I think this is just a delightful way to be able to sit, engage, and potentially explore some potential possibilities for you to maybe make some improvements with your collection. And thank you, Devin, for the very warm welcome. My name is Delandra Seals, and I am the Teaching and Learning Librarian at UNCW. And I have almost 17 years of experience in working from ages pre-K all the way through seniorhood. And so I have had the opportunity to work and explore my communities, whether they were suburban, urban, military community, international community, in many different ways. And one of the ways that I was able to do so was through my time on the Coretta King Book Awards. It was first a committee, and then it became a roundtable, exploring these wonderful texts and the impact that they can have on young children, their families, and their communities. So if you are here for advancing joy in your collection and or programming using the Coretta Scott King Book Awards, Roundtable's winners and honors, then of course you're in the right place. I do have a bit.ly code in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. I also have a URL that you can also use to access the slides. And so these will be available afterwards. And of course, NC Live or Devin will have these posted so that you can review these after the conclusion of today's event. And so if you do have any questions, you can add them in the chat, but we'll be monitoring those. I will try to answer them as they come along if it's definitely something I want to hit then, but we'll have an opportunity to explore and engage as well through our breakout rooms. Okay, so as you saw with the bit.ly and the QR code, there'll be some opportunities for some interactive audience engagement. We'll have some polling throughout. So you would like to get your cell phone, mobile device, an iPad or tablet that can scan QR codes, or if you have a laptop, you're welcome to, join us through the URLs that you'll see available. Okay. I have a link tree that's on here, and this link tree also has some resources that I've used in the past when I have presented this topic elsewhere. So you'll see quite a few means in there, like some Padlets and things, and I'll continue to share these throughout as well for you all. And potentially I can also add this link so that they can go in there with Devin tomorrow. All right, so I just kind of want to get an idea. If I may ask you to go to the chat, and I would like to, if anyone is a school librarian who happens to be joining us today, may I ask you to maybe give a shout out in the chat, a thumbs up, or some type of emoji. Who here happens to be a school librarian? And if we don't have any school librarians because you might actively be in school, then I will jump on over to public librarians. Maybe you might be in youth services. Maybe you might be an assistant there. You can add an emoji, add a thumbs up. You can react. Let us know who's there. Yes, some public librarians. That's right. You're all rock stars. If anyone happens to be an academic librarian, maybe you have a teaching resource center, maybe you might have a curriculum materials center, you might work with, you might happen to work at a campus with a LIS program for rising school librarians or academic librarians. You might work with a program like a school of education or college of education. Yes, thank you. Shout yourselves out, give yourself some wonderful celebratory praise. Some people here might also be friends of the libraries. Maybe you might be a part of some of the partner organizations or communities that work very closely with librarians. And if you're here, we welcome you. Thank you for joining us today. We're all here doing the hard work to support I'll say young folks, young people, their families and their communities, and this is a wonderful way for us to engage. So thank you. Just want to get to know you all. But as you know, the Coretta Scott King Book Awards Roundtable, previously the committee, was created in honor of the work of the wife of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Coretta Scott King. And one of the quotes that really spoke to me early in my work, not only as an educator, but then as a librarian, was that the failure to invest in youth reflects a lack of compassion and a colossal failure of common sense. And so this was very powerful to me. And, when I came into teaching at a time when North Carolina was going through the hiring freeze and some economic challenges post-recession, and, money was tossed around. We don't have enough money. We can't fund this. We can't fund that. And we're going to have to cut these programs. We won't be able to continue to have these resources, and that really hit me because they were programs that I saw support students and young people as I was growing up. And I saw their successes. I saw the benefits to not only that child or their family, but also to the community. And so I still find that this quote will always ring true in that we have to do the work. It is a work of families, the communities together, because if we want people to succeed, we must invest in them very early, not just with a curriculum, of course, but also we can do that work in the libraries. So some of you, may I ask you to maybe add an emoji or a thumbs up if you have ever heard of Verna Myers. Verna Myers is a scholar who uh, started in I would say her work in maybe the late 1960s with windows, mirrors, doors, sliding doors, and really pushed the idea of reading ICS, that the books that children read can open up so many worlds, and that young children, adults, teens really need to either see themselves in the books that they read. They need to maybe be exposed to things that they haven't seen before, or that blend in between. And so this quote from Verna Myers: diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. And this rings so true, even in today's world, right? Sometimes the diversity is just checking the box, right? Oh, you're here. Oh, we're here. We want to make sure we have this many of this many. You're fitting, whether it's a demographic or a quota or whatever that may be required. Even if you even think about, if anyone is in a K-12, or I don't think we had any school librarians, but they also want to make sure they don't have too many children with needs in the classroom, or too many advanced students in a classroom, too many students who might be repeating a grade in a classroom. Like there's always this, these categories that are trying to be fit. But then there's a difference when you actually are a part of the discussions, when you are a stakeholder, when you are in the conversations and you are involved in the decision making that's going to happen, that will either bring an organization, a program, a school, a curriculum forward, right? That is the next step. And so I bring this up because you can have these books on your shelves, you can have these books in your libraries, but if you do nothing with them, what is the point, right? If you have folks who are representative of these backgrounds, facets of diversity, they can come in, check out books, but if you're not doing anything to engage them and to support them, then you are failing them, right? That is that sense of failure that could be experienced. And so we must do more than just have the books on the shelves, have the people come in the building, because they're leaving the building, and those books may not leave the shelves. There's a certain point when it may not be helpful if you do not engage them and ask them to participate in dance. And so diversity in general, just a very general definition, it's just a variety of representations, experiences, and points of view. And so, a lot of people, again, they try to think of the boxes. They think of, oh, I'm filling out an application. I have to write my demographics, but it's more than that. It's also experiences, lived experiences, because they do shape who we are. Someone who grew up living abroad is going to have a very different point of view, or different routines and procedures, and even thoughts, compared to maybe someone who grew up in the US, right? Or points of view. I want to, this is going to sound very weird, but I'm a very short person. I am under 5 feet tall. And the way I view the world is not the same as someone who might be 6'7". If I am always quickly getting to the shelves on the bottom, but not able to quickly get to the shelves on the top, how I walk around and navigate this life in this world is very different from someone else. And now, yes, that's height, but it goes the same way with your beliefs, your values, and your mores. They are all very personal. And even within a family or community, just because you have these certain qualities or beliefs, they're not the same as others. We're all very unique. And so, one of the things that's extremely important in this conversation is that sometimes you have authors who are kind of given this role as a gatekeeper, okay? And these folks are actually kind of like the gatekeeper to maybe a facet of culture. And so one of the things that has happened sometimes is that the author actually ends up, we find out more details down the line, and maybe that individual turns out to not necessarily be the gatekeeper for that area of culture. And maybe there's some other things that might keep them um, maybe from positively representing a community. And so, own voices, when I say that, I'm talking about an author who might be from that marginalized or underrepresented group who's writing about their own experiences. And so, that is authenticity. And so, one of the titles, and if anyone happens to have a title that comes to mind or an author who comes to mind, as so maybe someone who was previously considered to be the gatekeeper, but then actually turned out to maybe have that role removed, feel free to share. Um, there's also some titles in some books where it turns out maybe that person was not a part of that marginalized or underrepresented group. One title that always comes to mind is the title The Indian in the Cupboard, and that's by Lynn Reed Banks. And this one had some very negative stereotypes and tropes against Native Americans and indigenous peoples. And so this was one, I mean, now Lynn Reed Banks was not considered a gatekeeper. However, this book has taken a different turn as time has gone on. This book was very highly read. In the early 90s, and even a film came out. I believe they were even talking about a sequel, but then somewhere along the line, they were technically, kind of started to roll back quite a bit. And you also have some folks in popular culture media. um, I don't know if you, let's see, there is an individual, a lot of folks may remember that there was a woman who happened to be in the West Coast, who decided to be a part of a lot of African American communities and campus departments. And she actually was able to be fully, almost, I'll say the words, fully integrated and very welcomed by the community. And it turned out that after some time, that it turned out that that wasn't even her background at all, that she turned out to not even be a person of Black African descent at all, Rachel DeLille. And this was really disconcerting for a lot of folks because, she changed her appearance. She used stereotypes, tropes to change her speech patterns in order to, I don't want to say the words, to gain credibility in this area. You also have other folks and celebrities whose wives have turned out to not be of Latin or Hispanic descent and have actually, they were very welcomed and embraced by the communities, and they actually aren't even a part of those. So you really have to find, that nice balance, and you have to investigate some of these authors to ensure that they actually do, authors, the books, everything, that the culture is authentic, the authors are authentic, the illustrators are authentic, because if the children are going to read this, this is lasting. And so they're going to have lasting impacts down the line. And you want to make sure, and it's tough because what flies today may not fly, 10 or 15 years from now. It's very unfortunate. But as best as you can, you really want to make sure that they are representing authentically. Because not all representation is good representation. Okay. And so from the, this is one of the most recent infographics that were released by the Cooperative Children's Book Center. And this is an organization that does the work to investigate and really to investigate and really dive into the data on children's publishing. Okay, so this one uh, was this set of research, in particular, this one, a primary character and subject, was based on the fact that they realized, we have a very low number of publications that are actually illustrated and written by diverse authors, right? And then as far as the characters within the books, they started to realize that, oh my, there are more books with animals than there are diverse characters, right? We definitely can see, and you can still see that it's the case today. They've been, really charting this along the way. So they started to see who are the primary characters or subjects in the books. And you can see, we have 28% here, we have 12% there. And you can see we have 5% where there's lots of diverse characters or subjects, more than one here in particular. You can see we have all these different facets of diversity, even religion, disability status. Sometimes there is no object or primary subject character. But here to again, see if you take a look again that you have animals representing 20% of the characters, but yet you have people at numbers or percentages that are far lower, except for the one dominant category. Okay. And so if you have a population whose demographics make up more than, let's say, this 12%, then one would think that there would be more books, especially closer to that matching percentage of the population represented by the books that are available on the shelves. And so you are welcome to check, you can Google the Cooperative Children's Book Center. They most recently updated this in early April of this year, and really take a look at some of the data that they've been able to collect. And they regularly report on lots of different areas. This is another one, and this is about books and the authors who published them, the topics of the books, as well as the primary subject. This is just another breakdown. And 70% are made of people who are not of color. Only 40% have maybe one creator, right? So it could be an author or an illustrator, a compiler, an editor. And so you can even see these numbers are still very low. We had less than 3,500 titles published um, in 2023, and this data is representative of that. And so really, getting to know what's actually out there and available is another area that is extremely important, because if you have a community, if within your community, if you're in the public library, if you have an increasing, population from other areas of the world, and let's say there's only 0.7% of titles being published that year coming out that represent the cultures of those peoples, then you know that there's going to be a lot of maybe some hard work in order to find titles, right? It may take a little bit more effort in getting to know those authors, those illustrators, those publishers who were able to produce those books that'll be available. So it is something to get to know very early on. And especially, as you can see, we do have one facet of diversity where it's, not even a percent, it's 0.2%. And so even though Moana 2 is coming out, and that's still only one of maybe three Disney movies available out there out of their entire history. That still might be that's probably a higher percentage than what may be available out there in print or text. And so definitely take a look at, sorry, I'll go back. Definitely take a look at the Cooperative Children's Book Center in your research and exploring. And so one of the ways, I'm mentioning the publications, I'm mentioning the authors, the illustrators, one of the ways that you can, maybe begin to do the work is, what's called a diversity audit. And you've probably heard this tossed around a little bit. You've had some folks even participate in the NC Live sessions in the past, especially Dr. Kenesha Bright out of East Carolina University. For any pirates out there, Pirate Nation is strong. I'm a pirate myself. And the work here is really just about assessing and analyzing your current collection. And you're taking a look to see how you can better update your collection to better serve your community or even your school. And it can, depending on the size of your collection, it could be a very arduous task to take on. It also could be something maybe you only want to look at maybe the children's books or maybe the picture books, nonfictions. It does not have to be the entire library. And in your role, you may only work on a small subsection. Maybe it is something that you take on together as an entire library. Maybe it is. But again, working on those goals and what you hope to achieve is, of course, of the utmost importance. And so, as I mentioned before, you have points of view, experiences, you have representations. You want to make sure that when you are analyzing and assessing your collection, that you keep these in mind. Are various points of view, experiences, and representations available for folks? Because if you only have one point of view, one type of experience representations, then you're still missing people. There's still gaps. And so I said this before, but not all representation is good representation. And so being very careful. You know that there's a hypersensitivity and hypervigilance on libraries and their collections at this time. And so it's really important that maybe you are well researched and versed and the titles and the materials that you might add to your collection, and that you have the data and the information knowledge in order to support the addition or even the removal of texts from your collection. Many of you may know, the National Education Association disassociated themselves from Dr. Seuss and their text for Read Across America Day. But unfortunately, you still see many schools and communities still try to tie those two together. But it's been over 10 years that those two have actually separated. Some folks are unable to make those steps and those kind of disconnections. And because the NEA now fully just supports all literature, kind of that UN stance of all literacy, and not focusing on just one author, not one illustrator, not one body of work, but really just ensuring that we support increasing the access to reading materials and supporting children and gaining that lifelong reading habits and enjoyment. And so patrons who come into your library, whether it is a school, a public, maybe it's even the teachers, of course, learning about materials to add, they need to see diversity in their reading selections. If you only have books about dogs in your libraries, well, kids are kids and they need to see kids in their libraries. If you have folks who are, technically maybe at a middle school or in a community, they just need to see lots of different options in what they are viewing in their personal reading. And so one of the things I'll briefly I'll talk about just even right now is as far as the facets of diversity, some of the things that are sometimes missed are actually um, other areas of diversity. Sometimes people forget that you have families who are not traditional family types and structures. You have foster parents, you have students who might live with grandparents, you have McKinley-Vento households. And so it's really important to ensure that you have books that represent all those different possible backgrounds. You also have students who are young people who might not have English as their first language. Maybe they're bilingual, trilingual. And so making sure that all those are available for them in order to engage and explore is also very important. Just because something is typical for you, or even maybe typical in the community, does not mean that there aren't other possibilities out there for folks. And so making sure that those are available. And of course, you also have there's just so many facets of diversity that are more than just what someone looks like, or maybe where they live or the community where they go to school. It's not about class, socioeconomic status, or anything. There's just so many more. You could, and also, veteran status or disability status. Those are all something to keep in mind too as you explore. And so we're going to just kind of jump right into the Coretta Scott King Book Awards, just to kind of give us a bit of an overview of their role in their and their goals and their roles. If there's any questions, again, just kind of proceeding along, you are more than welcome to add some things in the chat, or maybe you might have something positive to share in your own experiences. You're welcome to type that in there. All right, so this is a good time to grab that personal device. Perhaps it is a cell phone, perhaps it is your laptop. If you have another, open up another tab. I just kind of want to get an idea here of what you already know. So if I may ask you to name a award-winning author, illustrator, or title that is not won CSK. So it could be another award. It could be Newbery, Caldecott, Stonewall. If I may ask you to use this QR code, or if I may ask you to join, you can use the Slido.com and then you can type in the numbers. And let's see who you have. Just tell me a an author, an illustrator, or a book that's won an award, not CSK. So that is true. Toni Morrison has won awards, but we're going to get some of the other award winners. Yeah, she hasn't written any children's books, so she's very relevant. There have been some adaptations. So tell me, who can come to mind? Eric Carle? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, think of maybe Caldecott, Newberry, Stonewall, any of those other words, pure bull prey. Okay. All right. And I think we have a third person in there. And again, you can use this QR code. You can type in slido.com. We have a 3941801. All right. And you are correct, of course. Neither of these authors have won a Coretta Scott King Book Award or honor. And we have a few more folks joining us. Yes, Raul the third. Thank you all for adding some more options here. And before I move on to the next one, okay. Molly Idle. And of course, you might even be working with the, maybe you don't work with kids or Last Stop on Market Street. True, but technically, this might be the good place to segue. Technically, that has actually won that one won and was an honor for everything. We still belong. So we're now going to move to the next one, and someone's going to finish typing there. But I have a second one for you. We have William Faulkner. Yes. Yeah. Of course, the classics, what we consider the classics, Clarissa Ortega. So yeah, thank you all. Those are all very good options here. But now I want to see if you already know one. So whoever typed in Last Stop on Market Street, go ahead and be prepared because you're going to add it to the next poll. Do you already know any books, right? Any authors, any illustrators that have won the Coretta Scott King Book Awards? Yes, the Last Stop on Market Street would be one undefeated. Yeah, just to kind of get an idea. If you recall the books on your the books on your shelves, do you recall seeing the seals? Do you recall? Oh, yes. Yeah. Do you recall seeing the seals on your books? And of course, if you do not have the seals, definitely consider purchasing them because those monies do go back to the round table to support the winners and honors who come along. Yeah, King and the Dragonflies. Yeah, these are recent. Sharon Draper, just such a vast amount of work. Kadir Nelson, absolutely. So many authors and illustrators, look to both Sharon Draper and Kadir Nelson. Nigeria Jones, yes, you are all already versed in some of the best, the greats, and currents right now. So thank you for sharing your current knowledge of the awards. I think this might be the most the most variety I've ever seen as far as what folks have already attained when it comes to these awards. Okay. All right. So as I mentioned before, the CSK Book Awards honors Dr. Martin Luther King's wife, Coretta Scott King. And these awards came about because African American authors and illustrators were not being nominated or even winning an honor to the Caldecott and the Newbery Awards. There were wonderful, great works that, of course, should have competed and potentially could have won, but they weren't even being nominated. So with that exclusion came the idea to develop a roundtable, not a roundtable, excuse me, develop a group and a committee in order to make progress in celebrating those African-American authors and illustrators so that they can be encouraged to continue the work. And so these titles are all going to demonstrate an appreciation for African-American culture and, of course, just universal human rights. So we have both the winners and the honors. The bronze-ish type seal is the winner, and the honor titles are with that silver color. We also have the John Steptoe Award, and this one is given to a new or rising author or illustrator. And it's those who might not even be recognized or considered for a nomination. It gives them that opportunity to be celebrated and help encourage them to continue their work. We also have the Virginia Hamilton Award that can go to an author illustrator, but technically it also can go to another type of practitioner and educator as well, who has supported and significantly contributed to African American culture, literature, and the culture of reading. And so we're going to talk just very briefly about opportunities where you can expand your programs and displays. And these are some of the successes I have had in the past. I'm going to try to fly through them just a little bit so that we can make sure we have plenty of time as we dive into really more of our breakout. But if you have any ideas or anything you'd like to share, questions, don't forget that we have the link to the slides, of course, in the chat. Thank you, Devin. But feel free to add those questions there. One of the things that we often see just kind of like a calendar events. You might have cultural programming calendars in your libraries, but there are lots of days throughout the year in which literacy and the love for reading can be celebrated. And so, one of the things that I even did was just writing these down and getting that visual of what's happening every single month, because I wanted to find ways that I could integrate. And I know some people are like, oh, a celebration day. Oh, that's but I was in the public libraries and I was in the school, and it was actually helpful as a starting point before I started to develop my own original programming to kind of have that wrap around with these celebration days. This is kind of like that level one, and then of course you can create your own and original and build from that along the way. But if maybe are new to programming, or maybe you're introducing these CSK award winners and honors, it may not be a bad idea to wrap these around and integrate them into something like these days, or something that you're already doing, right? Having that representation and having these available for learners and readers patrons at your libraries. So the year starts off great with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, right there in January. And that is a great way to start. We have Library Shelfie Day. Of course, we have Black History Month, but we also continue on to do you remember Dear, Drop Everything and Read? We have National School Library Month. I mentioned Read Across America Day before previously with March, but there's others, right? Children's Book Week in May, Audiobook Appreciation Month, Library Card Sign Up Month. There's so many things every single month, except about July. I think that's the only one that I realized, like, oh, we actually don't really have anything in July, but every single month in the year really does have something. And so you can find a way to maybe pick one or two of these, right? And maybe you can use that to help launch your development of something new. And so I started to go through and kind of like almost like a topical analysis type approach to all the award winners. And I actually started from the entire listing. And in fact, let me take you all back just a second. I'm going to open up another slide for you all, and so that you can see the awards winner page. I think it'll be very beneficial for you all to see. ALA, if you didn't already know, if you maybe haven't been on there a little while, but they upgraded to the most recent edition of Drupal. And so you can find information about the roundtable on here. We just celebrated 55 years of the awards. You can learn more about the awards on here. But one of the biggest things is you can actually see all of the recipients. And then my time on the committee, I was on the executive board for what, five, almost 6 years. So I will actually, and I think we're pouring down raining. I think I'm actually having a little bit of, it's okay, some trouble, but not so much. But we have all of the titles going all the way back to the very first awards in 1970. I apologize for the very, 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 very quick scroll. I'm going to go back up to the top, and we go all the way to the present. Okay, there we go, with the present titles. And so if you're looking for a place where you can actually see all the winners and honors, this is a great place to begin. So we have each year featured, probably from the last, maybe the last 9 or 10 years, they do have their own page, but you are able to see each of these. I'm going to switch back over there. And so what I did is I just said, I want to kind of get some topical themes that are very common in these books. And one of the biggest ones, as a musician myself, I started looking for, titles that feature music. You have Jazz Appreciation Month. I can go back. I believe that is, yep, Jazz Appreciation Month is in April. And the North Carolina Jazz Festival happens to usually be in the beginnings of March. And so we often have folks from the Kennedy Center here. If we have jazz musicians in town, a lot of you live in very big cities with a strong musical presence. And I just wanted to be able to find and identify those titles that I can quickly pull from the shelves whenever we had something going on. And so this is one of the means of doing that. I found these author honors, but there's so many more titles available. And you look at that list and it's like, I don't know, like, or they're all, of course, on the shelf and, shelved accordingly. And you're like, you just don't know where to begin and what books to pick. You go and you to your catalog and you type in jazz, you're not sure which one is, if are these actually award winners and honors. So it can be a very, very arduous task. And I've kind of done some of that work for you with these slides and going through and just trying to find titles going all the way back to 1970 that will fit these topics. And so you have, Jimi Hendrix, Melba and her big trombone. You have John Coltrane, also from North Carolina, Nina Simone, also from North Carolina. And you see all these titles featured. A lot of folks know Duke Ellington, but there's also, like I said, Mr. Bojangles. So all these are opportunities that you can introduce music, jazz, if you're in a school, right? You can, partner with your music teacher. And or maybe you might even bring some musicians into your public library. We'll talk more about some of those program opportunities. But Billie Holiday's "God Bless a Child" is, and this was actually on, I believe this is also a Reading Rainbow selection way back in the day. But you can also see some of these opportunities. Trombone Shorty, Ray Charles, Mama Africa again, Duke Ellington. These are all titles, Aretha Franklin, that fit that category. And you are, if you have teenagers, maybe you might decide to, have some hip hop programming. You have When the Beat Was Born, and that was on based on DJ Cool and beginnings of hip hop, or another Jimi Hendrix title. One of my favorites I used to love was the Jazzy Miss Mosetta. It had some wonderful syncopation and some rhythmic audience participation that you can do with your students, and the students always loved when we together read Jazzy Miss Mosetta. I mentioned teens, and so this is sometimes the teen readers. It's not that it's tough, but it's one of those where their interest, right? If they're not already readers, how do you get them interested? You always deal with that. There are lots of authors, and you see I have several like Jason Reynolds titles on here. You have Renee Watson, Angie Thomas here. There's so many others, even Kwame Alexander. There's a lot of authors. Of course, not everyone wins or is an honor, but still celebrate their work. So at the end of the day, I'm not saying you just have to use these, but this is a launching point for everyone when they're considering what to add or what to do with titles. And so, having these out there or featuring book talks, this is another great way to engage readers or even patrons in your libraries, because there's so many more about the teenage experience, and from lots of different parts of the country, whether, it's in the South with the Parker Inheritance, whether it's inner city or suburban. There's all these different experiences that are here, from male point of view, from a woman point of view, LGBTQ, lots of different options for readers, as well, and in different formats. You even have New Kid available, graphic novels. April is National Poetry Month. You might have poetry slam groups in your library or in the community. You might have authors, young authors nights or writing nights, or certain events that could engage patrons and young people or even families to write together. Nikki Grimes and Hope Anita Smith are two. Klein Ransom's titles here. These are all poetry titles that sometimes, I'll be honest, they're just forgotten. But all of these have won author honors. And we even have more, even some in the picture book format for readers that you can enjoy. Ashley Bryant's ABCs of African American Poetry is still a staple. And this is one, as you know, Ashley Bryant recently passed. And of course, we have Langston Hughes, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, with E.B. Lewis doing the illustration. And if you know who E.B. Lewis is, that was a very big deal for that. That's something that still is celebrated with their collaboration. But these are all staples that can be really a part of that core collection of the must-haves for your library. And you can see even some more winners and authors here. Out of Wonder with Kwame Alexander. Oh my gosh, it's just they're just all such amazing titles that you can use to build that are must-haves. And so potential events that you can do, could be poetry slams with local artists, poetry workshops. I brought in Big B, our Cumulus radio station manager, and some young poets who happened to participate. And at this school that I worked at, this was actually a school that was a suburban school that did not have a lot of representation. This school happened to actually have almost 97 or 98% not of color. They were not BIPOC students. And so having the representation available, but also having the perspectives and points of views that were different than the predominant population of that school was very important. The students are going to navigate the world that may not look like the school that they attended, and therefore they need to see the excellence in these titles and be able to learn from the experiences of others that are different from their own. You may also have students interested in science fiction, right? Science fiction, I mean, it's not just Star Trek. Well, actually, I'm a big Trek fan, excuse me, but it's not just Star Wars, right? It is not just whatever is on the Sci-Fi Network. Sci-fi community has been very welcoming to people of color, and it is a future. A world. You may have seen some of the Afrofuturism exhibits we had at the gosh, what in Cary at the art. I don't want to call it a museum. Is it art museum? The Cary Art Museum?
NCMA.
Thank you, NCMA, North Carolina Museum of Art. I appreciate that, Devin. Thank you. They had the Afrofuturism traveling exhibit that was there for about 2 years. It is currently in Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture, but is very welcoming for a time when we transition from a time of struggles and strife and overcoming so many obstacles, and we're all on the journey as a peoples. But sometimes that science fiction puts us in a different plane, a different reality to explore different possibilities, right? Maybe different types of hope. And so this genre has been very welcoming. And you can see that there are a lot of folks who enjoy Star Trek or enjoy time travel or these different universes and realities of science fiction. And these authors have been out for just actually not very long, but they have written some amazing works. But Black culture with Soul Food Sundays, I Too Am America. We have illustrators who are exploring the stars, who are just celebrating being themselves and also getting in touch with the African roots. These are all titles that you can have. Again, core collection titles. Everyone loves good food. Everyone. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. But wow, this young boy cooking with his grandma to prepare for Sunday dinner is one that might resonate with many of the families and the young patrons you have in your library. I enjoy Crown, an ode to the fresh cut. Actually, Derek Barnes is actually residing in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he wanted to pay homage to the Black cultural experience of learning about getting a haircut and how you look when you walk in that door to your classroom, and you could feel you feel you feel so good. You learn how to tip your barber, and you learn how important hair might be to you and your culture. But also remembering some of the other things that happened, civil rights movement, people who were inventors, masters, Nobel Prize winners like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and so many others who inspired us and continues, whose work transcends even to today and will in the future. And so you can, partner with Black Greek lettered organizations, also known as the Divine Nine. So these would be the Greek fraternities. Local NAACP. I've worked with the 100 Black Men of Wilmington. I believe there's one for Charlotte, Durham. There's local leaders in your community who have political offices. They're government officials. Maybe they're police officers, firefighters, EMS. They might be physicians or lawyers or work with the health department, dentists, right? Or doctors. These are all folks you can bring in in order to support you and be present in your programming. They also may be parents and patrons within your libraries. If you're, if you're looking for folks, put a call out, put a sign up and ask folks to, kind of like to self-declare, self-nominate in order to volunteer and actively participate. At my campus, I worked with the Upperman Center of African American Culture and Heritage when I was in the K-12 schools. And I partnered with them, and we developed programming where they sent staff to us, or maybe they shared resources with us. And you may have those at university campuses nearby. But always is most important, especially whether in a school or public, there's also family members, right? You have some folks who are pillars of the community, maybe because of family members of the past. And these folks can also be active participants and to engage and to share their stories, storytelling. They can be very pivotal in sharing the authentic point of view, especially from a time period of those we are losing every single day. And so these are just some pictures of some of the programming I have. Our assistant county manager, who is now the health department director. She started off in the K-12 school system as an executive, moved up. I have a doctor. I have Black Greek letter organization members who are also 100 Black men of Wilmington. I have a county commissioner, city council member. And here I have a CEO of a nonprofit. But if you've come into the Wilmington area, we actually have it's the only Black African American history tour. If not in North Carolina, it may be in the entire country. And they go around Wilmington and learn about not just the 1898, but some of the other cultural areas of significance, and how African Americans have impacted or been impacted by the Wilmington area. Also, there is a PBS documentary that just started airing on Tuesday, with the American Experience. You can learn more about Wilmington's history in 1898 there. But celebrating families are important to all cultures. Well, if you're celebrating families, if it's Grandparents' Day in September, Mother's Day, Father's Day, why not make sure that you have these titles out for folks? It's Watson's Go to Birmingham. Yes, that title's been out for some time, but there's also Brown Girl Dreaming, One Crazy Summer. There's also Jacqueline Woodson's Before the Ever After. There's many titles that are available that you can bring in, just like I mentioned Soul Food Sunday before. But oh my goodness, Last Stop on Market Street. Again, I didn't say before, this is truly one of my favorite titles. Christian Robinson, oh, he's one of my favorite illustrators. And I have just enjoyed every work who's come from, not just him, but so many others here. We have another Barbershop Tale with Uncle Jed. We have Tar Beach. Thank You, Omu. Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters. These are just classic core titles you can add to your collection. But bringing in those grandparents, right? Bringing in the fathers, bringing in the mothers, and celebrating them, making sure that they feel welcome and that they know that there is a space and a place where they belong in your libraries. Every community has an arts and cultural center. It could be very small, it could be a community center, it could be big, but there's arts all around, right? And I mentioned the jazz before, but Firebird by Misty Copeland, oh my goodness, first principal ballerina with the American Ballet Company. And I mean, just continues to inspire so many young girls and boys, and I'll just say young people today, with the work that they've accomplished. And even someone who may be of the Afro-Caribbean descent, to also impact others through their works of art, and especially with protest, revolutionary art, right? The more than just the avant-garde, but challenging and putting out something that's very thought-provoking, in order to inspire change in people. As always, biography is the authentic voice. There's this wonderful title, Andrea Davis Pinkney, talking about the African women freedom fighters. There's so many movies out for us adults, but thinking about the opportunities for young people to have the same exposure to the material. The African American whalers, a lot of people do not know, have even explored, hearing about whether it's African American or Black pirates, or even people working in ships, the shrimping industry here in North Carolina. The first in fact, lighthouses here in North Carolina. There's actually I'll think of her name. Oh gosh, her son Jeffrey. They're right out of Fayetteville. I'll think of their name in just a moment. But they actually wrote a title based on the African Americans who manned one of the first lighthouses in North Carolina. And they were actually they served in the Civil War, and then they kind of like didn't have jobs anymore. But they still needed people needed to safely navigate our coastline in North Carolina. And so a group of Black men came together and said, you know what, we need to make sure ships don't crash. And they started manning the lighthouse up there. I will have to think of that author's name. I apologize that she has left my mind, and I'll come to it a little bit later. But there's so many other biographies. Bessie Coleman. People always think about Amelia Earhart, but man, you have Bessie Coleman. Hidden Figures movie came out. Well, guess what? There's lots of titles now. There's more than Rosa Parks. You have Potters. People talk about Michelangelo. People talk about Raphael. Well, we have a wonderful person folks can learn about with Dave the Potter and learn about his story. He was a slave, but he was very famous for his works of sculpture and pottery. Especially in North Carolina, we have our what is it? We're well known for, it's not the sea glass community with the pottery. If anyone happens to know of the name of the area, by all means share it in the chat. But we have a very special, there's a special type of clay that's only found here in North Carolina, and that area is very well known for the pottery that is produced there. But you also have the folks who are epically known, just as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, as well as Harriet Tubman. Displaying these biographies for people to see, so that people know that we have greats. Yeah, these are some of the older titles because I also didn't want them to forget that we still had them on our shelves. But there are others, whether it's in athletics, whether it is in music, government, there's so many people available out there. And I mentioned sports. We have the crossover by Kwame Alexander. We have Sticks Malone, Muhammad Ali. In fact, we have that one fight with Mike Tyson coming up very shortly. So if it's not a bad idea to put up a display with some of the great boxers. We just finished the World Series. You also could have included some of these texts in some displays. Every culture has a set of stories and mores, mythology, folk tales. There's some that are just staples that are always talked about, right? Well, there's also those in the African diaspora. And these are all that can be included as an option for folks to explore and include. People think of, oh, it's just the tortoise and the hare. Oh, there's more than that. Even Mufaro's Daughters, that people could fly. This wonderful collection of Black folk tales here. The Lion and the Austrian Chicks. This one's told by Ashley Bryan and Patricia McKissick. We have Faulkner's retellings of things with these folk tales. You can find a lot of these even too in audio. So that you can often hear these in an audio format as well. But I mentioned before, you have this, you can have a schedule of events, you can have lots of opportunities throughout the year, but even still, there's some just very general ones like National Book Month. We just had Banned Books Week. November is technically National Family Literacy Month. We know that we have Indigenous Americans Month. It was also for this month too. And so, but with family literacy, I mean, you can easily add some other titles, have multiple displays. It does not mean your whole library is just on one topic, one theme. Include multiples. Keep folks on their toes and change your displays up. I know it's work. It is work. It is true. But being able to prepare in advance. Kwanzaa is coming. The new year is coming. It's a good time to start planning for November, December, and then moving into January and February. Those are great opportunities to plan now. Taking a look at what titles, whether it's a display or a program, maybe even making those connections with who you would like to have come into your library. But one of the things that comes up every year in February is the African American Read-In. And I'll make sure that I put the link in the slides because there is a wonderful website, and I believe it really is through it's through BCLA, and you're able to kind of like let's say nominate, but you can go in and type in information about your own event in your community, and you can kind of like put yourself on the map. And folks will be able to see, kind of see what's going on here. It's through the National Council of Teachers of English. And so I'll just make sure that gets added in here as a bit.ly on there. But, I'm, being able to have folks come in and I'll play this one. I'll make sure there's no audio, but just been able to, I actually pulled out all of our titles. So this transcends beyond just CSK. It's more than that, right? So having them available for people to see, I had hashtags out. I just wanted to celebrate all works, and that's what it's about. You don't have to just keep it winners and honors, but you can celebrate more than this. And I actually had the whole library set up and had an opportunity for people to see all of the books. People could not believe that a school library where 97, probably 98% of the students did not look like the characters in these books, or the authors or the illustrators, and had this many titles in the collection available, whether it was fiction or nonfiction. But it was about a lot of hard work and determination, and continuing the work of my predecessor, who had been in that library for 20 years before me, and maintaining that. And so I will make sure I turn off the sound here. I'll go back to 100%. But afterwards, I wanted to celebrate everyone and put together a wonderful collage of pictures and videos for people to see. There were grandparents who came in and spent, half a day with us. They spent, whether, or sometimes it was as few as an hour, to come in and read to to young students in the school. And I just wanted to celebrate them. I wanted them to see that, the impact of their presence in our school community and the work that they're doing to support all our efforts to meet our goals. And so I will, let's see, just to give you a general idea. And so as you can see, our guest reader, our students did not look like our guests, but that was okay. And that is what we need to have available, the different perspectives, points of views, and different representations than maybe what might be in your community. And any book that is an award winner can also be a part of a potential core collection. You are all sharing, these curated collections and ideas that you have, and making sure you're ordering the new award winners. That's wonderful. That is absolutely important. But don't forget, there are titles that don't win awards. And so I'm putting that plug in there too. Award winners are a great place to start, but when it comes to, they can be part of a core collection, but definitely, keep that work going with the next level, right? The additional and supplemental materials, and maybe those authors who have not received recognition just yet. And so Juneteenth is a holiday that is, kind of new to North Carolina. And so this was just another means that I used to celebrate the text and put them all over the library or everywhere. Just so that folks, again, we were year-round school, by the way. You might be wondering, well, why in the world would you do this at the end of the year with inventory and all these other things? Oh no, I was a year-round school, so we were still open. But putting out all the titles everywhere, there was no excuse to not know. There was no excuse. And this is actually, oh, I apologize. I said we were open. I did this as well in the public, in my public school, but this was actually at when I was branch manager at a public library. And this was just one of the areas of the library where we put out the titles. But BCALA has some wonderful resources to help with Black History Month. But yeah, there's always hashtags and other things, but the one plug I'll put in, because if we're getting to the end of time, is remembering folks who need accessible materials. We have the National Library Service for the print and the blind, to the Library of Congress. They are wonderful. We have actual kind of like consultants and folks at our state library whose job it is to help put books in the hands of people. And so I actually, when I went to ALA, I went to the Library of Congress, and I actually spent time with them. A special education teacher, always, I will be. And so I actually was able to, they actually gave me this title. It's in Braille. And these books, whether they are Braille or talking books, are actually made at no cost. And they can be sent to a patron's public library, and they can check them out for free. And so I highly recommend it if you are serving populations with differing needs and disabilities. Definitely make sure you make connections, whether you're in a public school or public library. Make those connections. You may have someone already in a public library, but making those connections so that you can make sure you have materials available for your students or your patrons. But again, they do the conversions. They take a book in print. They use the Braille machines to use them. They also do the talking books as well. But you work with the patron in order to kind of like do the application and set up I don't want to say the word account, but set themselves up so that the needs are known to the NLS, and they can get materials that are beneficial to them. So don't forget displays, put it out there, show the world, show everyone what you are doing and how you are able to support all the different learners and patrons in your community. And before we leave, I just want to check and see if maybe you have more to add. If I may ask you to get your personal device and go ahead and share another title, author, illustrator, a winner. Tell me name some folks, and you can do more than one. You can keep adding. Tell me an award-winning author, illustrator, or title with CSK. And you can add those questions to the chat too. If you're able to, we can answer anything before we move over to our breakout rooms. Vashti Harrison, absolutely. Yes, yes. I see some different names from before, and you can repeat some of the names from before. There's nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely okay. Because that person, that author, that illustrator, that title may be new information for you. So it is absolutely okay for you to share. Yes, Kwame Alexander, absolutely. Many titles. I mean, I can't exactly remember how many titles he has, but he has both more prose-like. He has the free-form writing. There's picture books. Oh, Jacqueline Weather, not Jacqueline. Oh, sorry. Whatever. Oh, I just had it. You know, the author I was mentioning earlier.
Folks, feel free to
Yeah.
send in questions.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah wrote some great ideas in the chat,
Mm-hmm.
sharing we
Mm-hmm.
try to order all award winners and runner-ups for our
Mm-hmm.
youth collection. We tie them
Mm-hmm.
to our teaching channel resources for our education majors,
Mm-hmm.
which is really
Yes.
great strategy for putting titles in the hands of teachers and
Mm-hmm.
connecting them to school libraries, classroom libraries.
Absolutely.
Um, Also
Yes.
sharing, we keep a curated collection of all the children's books we have, which have won awards or are on a list as well.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yes. All
Awesome.
right. And so everyone here, you know, the fact that you are here means that you're interested, you're curious, you're ready to support learners, patrons, and the needs of your community. And I'll leave you with this quote here by Coretta Scott King, and that is that if you don't use your power for positive change, you are indeed part of the problem. Right. So, you know, this is about doing the work, taking the steps, making the effort. You can continue to add questions here. You're also welcome you're also welcome to email me. I am at UNCW. This is too long here. I'm also at UNCW. You can find me. My face is on there. My picture is there. You're welcome to email me anytime if you would like if you have questions or just some ideas to bounce. You also, it sounds like there's some wonderful folks in this chat who are a part of making the positive change. And so feel free. You'll also see the slides too. And I just would like to give you that opportunity to connect or network with me. I'd love to see pictures of or videos or of what you've done. But yes, feel free here. Also to let you know, ALA once a year puts up a call for volunteers to join committees. CSK BART, it always has positions available, or maybe you might be able to join and be a member of a committee, or maybe chair as I did. So you are always welcome to go on to the website, and you are able actually the website has changed. I apologize. But you can volunteer to be a part of that through your ALA membership. And you can just select the roundtable and select the ones that you might be interested, the committees you're interested in joining.
I feel like the